Welcome, everyone. We are here with Bernadette Pleasant, who I had the opportunity to study under for her FEMME program several years ago, I believe it was. And I was just blown away by her work as a somatic healer, and I thought she would be perfect for the summit. So before we get started, just a little bit of background about Bernadette. She is a speaker, somatic healer, founder of the Emotional Institute. She's the creator of FEMME, a mind-body wellness program, which we just spoke about, and 400 Years, a somatic-based anti-racism program. She is known for channeling her personal journeys and radical empathy into transformative, immersive experiences that support and celebrate people of all genders, colors, ages, and sizes. Amen for that. She has transformed the lives of thousands of people around the world, inspiring them to become more self-expressed and empowered as, in her words, their own badass selves. She is certified in emotion-centered coaching, somatic healing, integrated energy therapy, and studies in African, tribal, and free dance. And Bernadette promotes emotional freedom through movement and empowerment, and also facilitates deep dialogues on emotional healing, grief, and unlearning racism, which we'll talk about in our interview today. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. Wow. I'm listening to that and I'm like, okay, let me show up with all of me for this here because I'm impressed by that.
I know, it's an impressive bio, isn't it?
It is, and it's beautiful to do the work that I love. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. So before we even get to what you're doing now, which we were talking a little bit before the interview started about your grief work. So we'll move into that, but let's rewind the clock a little bit. You speak often about your time as a child. Like many, you were trained to live within a narrow margin of emotional range, right? Many have gone through that. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey from that moment of limitation to realizing that you needed to expand beyond that range?
Absolutely. I grew up in a household where the Bible was law. And in the community, our religious community, there were serious rules, expectations, and certainly definitions put upon me. Very different from the world I want to see, where I get to tell the world who I am. I was actually told how I should dress, show up, what I should like and not like. And this felt very limiting. I know one doesn't have to be religious to feel these limitations, but this is what was happening in my household. And what I desired or liked or dreamed to do didn't matter. It had to fit in with the plan. And I found myself going along with this until I didn't, quite honestly. There came a point where I just felt like there were too many things cut off, most of which were my preferences and what I found pleasurable and things that I would enjoy doing. And I'm talking about things as simple as the length of my hair.
That's
colors.
pretty correct. Yeah.
That's it really just, it started to cut off who I am, even the ways I like to move and dance. And, it needed to be what was considered clean. I have to do those air quotes around that word because there was nothing dirty about what I was doing. But it raised eyebrows and there I could conform. But conforming and falling in line didn't feel good to me. And this frustration happens, and that happened for me, that's for sure. And I just decided when I could, I would do different. I mean, I was married I was given a proposition to stop seeing the boyfriend or get married. I was 17 years old. So that's because they didn't believe in dating. And
Was this the Deep South? This couldn't have been New York.
No, this was not the Deep South. This was New Jersey.
Wow.
This has nothing to do with proximity and all to do with religion. And this did not have to do with where I was. It was under this particular rule. That's what was to happen. And it sounds crazy because it was. But I was just angry enough by that point that, in my 17-year-old grown ass way, I decided, I'll show you, I'll get married. And that's what I did.
Wow.
So it was not a good decision. You don't make good decisions when you're when you're given an ultimatum at 17 and you're angry. Yeah.
You want to continue dating the guy, right?
And I wanted to continue. Basically, I didn't want to be told what to do. And there was an expectation, of course, that I would not get married. And yeah, my first marriage, that's how that began. And so that's the kind of thing, decisions get made, good, bad, or indifferent, as a result of the margins that someone wants you to stay within.
Yeah, it's interesting because I hear you and I feel you. I didn't have that strong of a religious foundation at all. I was baptized Episcopalian, Lutheran, Catholic, Baptist, and went to a born-again Baptist summer camp for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably the closest to what you're talking about, where dancing was considered sinful. I remember when Footloose came out, right? It was something that really resonated with me because I thought, oh my God, right? Here we are, dancing is this most beautiful thing. And at least in the born again Christian circles, right? And this was in upstate New York, so not far from you, right? They definitely thought that dancing was sinful.
Yeah, I didn't. Dancing wasn't. It was the way I danced. I didn't, and I mean, I'm talking. I was a child, so I was really just enjoying it. But I music moves through me. I love to move, and I love to be expressive with the movement. It shows up in the work I do, and music is medicine for me. Movement is medicine.
Yeah.
In fact, the only time I stopped moving was when I was getting that look. It wasn't with word. It was never, stop doing that. But it was a look that's too much, and Christian girls don't do that. And so I started to feel shame around all the movement that felt so good, and I started to try to contain that to make it acceptable. And I realized as long as it was acceptable, I didn't enjoy it. It
wasn't your expression.
It wasn't my expression. And my expression just when something feels good, you move. When something tastes good, you say, I'm a sensual being. I love touch, feel, movement, sound. I get off on this. I really enjoy it. And I think that's what we're here to do. So, yeah, I didn't want to have my movements, my thoughts, my dress, or my hair policed.
Yeah.
Didn't want that. Yeah.
Well said, right? And so many people deal with that. I mean, at least in this country, we've moved a bit beyond that, right? For the 1960s and 70s. But, we look to our sisters in Afghanistan and other parts of the world, and, they're still dealing with a lot of policing.
Absolutely. Yes, they are. And it does tend to happen more for women than it does for men. And there comes a point when I decided I just don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I had been married at that point. I'd been married close to 10 years. So I was a ripe 27. And I remember one day I had stopped going to our religious services because I just decided I don't want to do this. And my husband, who was my husband at the time, was very zealous in this. He was truly committed. I was not. I did it to keep the peace. He did it because he believed and loved it. We had very different values with regards to this. And I suggested that he continue going. I would support him, getting him and our daughter out, have dinner ready when they returned. He wasn't having it. He wanted his family to do this, and it didn't matter whether I wanted to or not. And so what happened one particular day, I literally just wrote a chapter about this. And one Sunday, he'd come home and he was angry, as he often was when I didn't go. And I was cooking dinner, and he came in, and I said something really simple, regarding dinner with rice or potatoes. And he didn't speak to me. He was angry, went into his office. And in that moment, something shifted. I didn't feel it. It was almost like a tide rising slowly. I didn't realize, I'd never considered leaving my family, leaving my husband and this entire community that I knew, and my parents, all in this religion.
How old was your daughter at this time?
6. She was 6 at this particular time.
Only child when you were going
Yes.
through this transition? Thank God.
Yes. And I'll just never forget this day. I walked into his office and I asked again, rice or potatoes? And, I was on punishment. He just was not going to respond. And in that moment, I decided, I'm done. I am done. I, without a thought, went into our bedroom, picked up my keys, my wallet, I put on a jacket, and I walked out the house. I thought about, from being 17 when I married, he was only a few years older than me, but we were both really young. But at 17 to get married, and now it was almost 10 years later. And I knew in that moment I couldn't take my daughter because I didn't know where I was going. And I knew she was safe. I always said he was an incredible father. I didn't need one. And so I walked out the house, and he came behind me, and he was, what are you doing? What this man wanted was his family intact going to the Kingdom Hall. We were Jehovah's Witnesses. And I went to put my key in the car, and he took the keys. And I just walked away from the car towards the street, having no idea where I could go, because every person I knew was part of this religion, and I would have been turned right around to go back home.
Wow.
And he grabbed the back of my jacket in an effort to stop me from leaving. He literally grabbed the collar, and I threw my arms back, and I walked out of the coach, out of the relationship, out of that marriage, that home, out of that religion. I was done.
Did you have any friends at all outside of this community?
Yeah, I had 2. And that's frowned upon, because it was very much, you just didn't spend time like that. And I ended up at this guy that used to do some work on our computers and what have you. And I went to school with him, so I knew this person, but I didn't expect to show up on his doorstep. And my other friend lived in another state. And yeah.
Where else would you go? You had to go somewhere.
I had to go somewhere. And I made a decision that day, and it wasn't easy. The days that followed, and of course I'm back home with my daughter, but not living there, because I was very, very clear. I was not coming back. In fact, a few weeks later, one day my daughter was having a particularly hard day. And this was not easy. That whole thing about children being resilient, I don't know that. I have not had that experience.
Yeah.
Um,
I understand. I mean, especially with their mother at that age.
yeah. Oh, it was awful. And I just was clear that I couldn't come back to the house. But a few weeks later, she was having a particularly rough day. I dropped her off at school because I would come back and forth to the house to be with her and to get her to school and ready for school and what have you. But clearly her family dynamic has shifted big time. And I got a call that she was crying, and my Achilles heel. And so I go to school and I pick her up and I decided maybe I'd try this again. And 2 days later, I tried to commit suicide. Yeah, I just felt like I was cornered.
Gosh, I guess we didn't talk about this before. The first time that, the first time that I interviewed way back when for the magazine, we really focused on the FEMME dance, and none of this came up. So this is,
But
wow.
but I will tell you, it was after that divorce, because we did divorce. And
Was that illegal according to the religion?
yes, in that religion, there are two reasons why divorce is allowed, and that is if there is physical abuse, which there wasn't. I did not have that experience. There was, I think, I would say emotional abuse, but there was no physical abuse, or adultery, and and that wasn't the case either. And so he would not be able to remarry unless I'd started seeing someone, and I did some years later. And he had grounds for divorce, and I told him, yeah, by all means, get the divorce you need.
So you were separated during that time until which there was an actual reason and an opportunity, really, I bet, for him to also part ways. And was it at that point where he was just ready, I bet, too, right, to move on with his life?
Yes, absolutely, yes, and that worked out. It all worked out really well. But um, there's this whole scarlet letter thing, and thrown out and ousted out of a congregation. All my friends, all my family at that point, and to my mom and I don't speak to this day. If you're not in the religion, you're as serious. I mean, yeah. So my work came from my own need to heal.
Yeah,
I created my body of work, the bodies of work, because I knew the importance of expression, the importance of feeling and expressing what's really there so that we can heal and move on. And I was going to do that. And
no matter what, right?
no matter what, no matter what, and the things, because I mattered that much to me. And I didn't want to be walking around with just carrying the wound.
Yeah.
I much rather move from the scar. And so by all means, this gaping wound at that time, slowly I started to find things that worked for me, or things I wanted to study about what I was feeling, what I was experiencing in my body. Because there
When
was
you first left, Bernadette, did you have a skill? Could you go and get a job somewhere right after
Yeah,
you?
I was working. Yes, by all means, I was working in New York. My husband controlled the money, but I worked, yes.
Okay. So it's not like you had to start from scratch
No, no, no,
from
no.
that regard.
No, scratch. Well, there was
From
a,
a financial perspective,
oh yeah, no. From financial perspective, I did not. The finances was the least of the problem.
yeah.
It was the I'd gone from mom's house to husband's house. I didn't know how to be in my house. I didn't know, hell, I didn't know how to be in this body house, let alone a physical house.
And a secular world to boot, right?
Indeed, indeed. And so I knew how to fall in line, because that's what you do there. But to have my own opinions, my own likes and dislikes, things were based on, my decisions were based on what I wanted. And I didn't know what I wanted at that time.
What were you doing for work?
I worked in the city. At that time, I worked for the 𝐬𝐻𝐫𝐫𝐢𝐻𝐿 Magazine and Research.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've always been curious,
Mm-hmm.
how your career started, and then when did that segue, right, from the other career kind of move into what you're doing now? Because it didn't happen overnight, I imagine.
No, it didn't happen overnight, and it happened very organically. I didn't sit with some business plan trying to figure out something. It was nothing like that. I was alone in this small apartment on the third floor of some multi-dwelling house, and trying to figure what I wanted to eat for dinner. I'm so used to preparing for the others and just
Potatoes and rice.
exactly, and then I realized, actually I want something different altogether. I learning what I wanted. Even furnishing a place. I only had me to consider. And as long as there was a space that was available that for my daughter, who was between her dad and we had agreed to live in close proximity. And so I found myself every Wednesday night going to, well, first of all, I should say I was in therapy. I had done therapy for years following that. And after that attempt, I was at suicide, and I needed therapy. And I worked with an incredible therapist for years. And I got to a point, though, where my body wanted to move, and I wasn't doing that. And I mean, I'm a mover. It is very difficult. For me to be still. I'm rarely still because, because there's rhythm in everything, and I hear it and I want to move it. And I used to go to this Cuban club in Newark, New Jersey every Wednesday night, and I loved it. I love to dance, so I would go to different dance venues a lot, but there was something about this Wednesday night place.
And you haven't been to Miami yet either.
I had I traveled quite a bit, but there was something about this place. They used live drums.
Ah, here come the drums. Yeah.
Here comes the drums. And as much as I would like to go to other places, Wednesday night became my church. Mm-hmm. And when I left there, I felt different than I felt other places. And there was this.
It unlocked something. It was almost like, people talk about, a Kundalini awakening. The drums that appears was your Kundalini awakening.
Indeed. And I just knew when I left there, while I could move emotions on the floor, I could be my full self. Because unlike piped music that start in, the drums got up under. There was nothing prescribed about them. And there's nothing prescribed about me. So there was this beautiful experience. And when I would leave there, I felt like I could make it another week till next Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I started to study what was it about the drums, because it was the drums. And it made so much sense to me to understand what was happening. Those drums relaxed something in us. If you can imagine that, of course, the heartbeat, it's the first sound we ever heard. And I always think about that in a womb, in a dark space where you are growing, you're safe. Mm-hmm. And that drum beat is there. I got to grow and shed and move about in different ways, and that drum beat was there. And so that became what I wanted to share with other people. I wanted them to understand and get that medicine. And I'm so glad I had that and other modalities and other studies that really brought me to the work I do.
I remember first being introduced to the drum as a foreign exchange student in South Africa, pre-apartheid, like, I was there in 1984. So I used to go to places in Soweto that I wasn't supposed to be because I couldn't understand why there should be a separation. And so I used to be snuck into Soweto to go hear the rhythms and the music, of the Black South Africans, right? Like, I'm an exchange student. Why am I only seeing one side? Of course, that got me thrown out of the country, but that's another story.
A whole other story.
It's a whole other story, right? What is she doing in here reporting on things we don't want her to be reporting on? But, that drum, I just, I remember I just thought, wow, right? There's something, I totally get it, right? And, to this day, you can't really see, but there's drums all over the house. There's shamanic drums, there's djembe drums, bongo drums, because there's something about it that, especially when you drum together in unison, it wakes something very primitive in you, like at a soul level, right? It's almost like bringing us back to our true authentic selves, which is energy beings having a human experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in that space, so much can happen. And it's interesting. There for some, there's resistance at feeling, and I'm thinking, no, that's your animal body. There's nothing to fear there. If anything, you're just finding more and more truth right there. This other stuff, this representative that we get to suit up in every day, that's not the real stuff. That's not where the healing happens. That's Teflon. That doesn't allow anything to sink in, anything meaningful.
It's funny. My whole life, I've always been the one to get up and dance, whether it's, I don't know, in a restaurant, places where you're not supposed to dance, but there's a band playing or there's something going on. I would just get up and dance. And, I always remember people are always embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I would try to drag people up and they were embarrassed. We can't dance here.
Yes. Yeah.
Or I'm not going to, maybe if I have a little more alcohol, I'll get up.
Right.
And I always thought this was the most ridiculous thing. And then afterwards, of course, one of the band members would always come over to me and say, thank you.
We're so happy.
They're so happy because, we sit there and play and we want people to move.
Yes.
We're musicians. And so, I spent my entire life being the solo dancer on the dance floor. So I hear you. I mean, I feel like dance is really, it's a way through, like Pema Chodron, the famous Buddhist, she talks about pain and suffering, right? We can't dart around it. We have to go through the mess.
Absolutely.
Only going through it do we heal the trauma and the pain and the suffering.
Yep. Yeah. Getting over something, getting over it is not helping. That it is getting through that the journey of getting through is, and that of course takes some courage to do it. And that's okay.
We resist, persist, right? What we resist, persist. And that's not just a Buddhist saying. Carl Jung said it. Other people have said it. We have to go through the mess. We have to feel the pain and get through it. I mean, that's one of the things that really drew me to wanting to learn more about your work with FEMME. And of course, you're doing so much more now. But do you want to talk about how you got to FEMME? Like, or was there a chapter before that?
Well, I taught some other modalities and I just wasn't, they weren't getting in there. I always say that I needed to bend my knees. I needed to growl and howl a little bit. My movement, my classes are very loud. I invite and encourage sound in them. So it's not about learning anything. It's asking your body like what is moving you right now? How does fear or anger, how does confidence and lust and desire, how does that move in your body? And if you didn't sugarcoat it, how does it move? And that's why I love using those drums as a backdrop, because the drums literally calm that nervous system while beckoning more out of you at the same time. And it's a incredible experience. So one of the things I started to do without noticing, I was teaching movement classes, and I would start throwing in these ideas that I had. And okay, I don't want to do a pretty dance. That felt, for me, it wasn't satisfying. What I wanted to do is move how I felt in the moment, whatever that was. So if I was frustrated, how did frustration move? I'm not interested in doing where does my left foot need to land and this and that. I mean, that there's a place for that, but that's not the kind of movement that was calling for me. And I started to put this thing together, met with a coach. Like, this is what I want to do, speaking with psychotherapists, because it was really important to me. If I went into this arena of emotions, how will I take care of people? And so
you did integrate science. I mean, you integrate science in the sense that even though you're not a psychotherapist, you wove in what you needed to know from them in order to take care of people during that experience. Because
absolutely,
I know I have not, been able to go off and, teach the FEMME classes like probably many of your other instructors, largely due to time. But I remember one really profound part of the instruction, and that was rage. Mm-hmm. Because I had never really experienced rage. All the other emotions were like, frustration, my entire 20s, So I mean, a lot of the other emotions, I knew about, but this rage thing, I was like, I don't even know what that is or feels like. And, because we did it collectively as a group, it was interesting to observe how other women were getting into rage through their bodies. That was pretty profound for me, actually.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it's really important for me to say this. Over the years, there have been some adjustments. We don't use rage anymore. We use anger.
Okay.
And there's a reason for that, because as you know better, you do better. And rage was one of the things that I talked about with the psychotherapist. As the world started to change, I needed to dial back on rage, because rage wasn't something I wanted people to tap into. So there's been some adjustments in the brand. The Emotional Institute brought about some adjustments. Well, I hear you, and I hear people say that about joy. So I don't know. It depends on who you're talking to. We could, all day.
Interesting. Actually, I could see that, though. I could see that, especially, I'm a New Yorker too, even though I'm on the West Coast now, and it's funny because people who don't spend as much time on the West Coast, and my East Coast friends, that word joy just seems too out there for them. Like, how do you do joy?
And some people are so in their head that they're more they don't even know how to access it in their body, which is what the work is about. And so I will say that the emotional tour, which is deeply, is the nucleus of a FEMME experience, taking people on that tour is necessary, because there is joy is something that, even joy, people who talk about, rage, they don't want to talk about anger and other emotions, but when your laughter is something that you are curtailing, when you want to share something that really lights you up, and the person you want to share it with can't receive it, so you don't show your joy. I mean, the ways in which we are cut off from truly feeling something that feels good. And some of it is self-inflicted.
It is, yeah. Most of
Yeah,
it.
I can't be too happy. I don't want to look crazy, because apparently being happy looks crazy.
Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure. I mean, it's interesting because I've lived all over the world, lived in 11 countries. And I found that in certain countries, right, this is a cultural thing. In England, that was true.
yes,
In
well,
Boston and everywhere in New England, pretty much that was true, right?
yeah,
Puerto Rico, that's not true. Or, Kenya, that was not true. I loved the Kenyans, right? They were always just like happy, happy, happy. The Nepalese, right? They might be a quieter, culture, but they do live joy. And certainly the Italians, right? There's no fear there.
well, this is where you get into axiology. Talk about science. Axiology, where one's born with, if are you familiar with it? I'm not
I'm
sure if
not.
you're
Tell me about
okay.
it.
I love to share about this because this comes up a lot in unlearning racism. So axiology, and simply put, is there's the globe, there's our circle. I don't even know if that shows up.
Yes, I can see it.
So there's an equator, and north of the equator, south of the equator. Up here, the growing season, short. So because the growing season is short, there are things that really matter to you. Survival. It's always about survival. Food, clothing, shelter. That's what's going to matter up here. Food, clothing, shelter, storage. How do we keep the food so that we can survive?
Yeah, through a long
Very
way.
important, short period of time. Below the equator, we don't worry about food. It's always growing. It's warm. There are trees with fruits. Different times of year, it's always there. Storage is not an issue. You're eating the food that's available to you
In real time. Yeah.
in real time. Clothing is not an issue. It's hot. You're not trying to survive. So storage isn't an issue. Clothing isn't an issue. Food isn't an issue. You have time for family. You have time for relationships. You have time for joy and party. So what happens here is this is where the racism comes in. These people are serious. They've got work to do. Short period of time, timelines, They see these people as lazy. They're not. They work different because they can.
Right.
These people see these folks as rigid. They don't have fun. They don't know how to. These folks think these folks walk around naked. It's hot. Think these folks. So you understand?
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah. So that's the study is called axiology. And axiology is really important to understand. It helps us understand people better. And it starts to, now I get you. You're not, because of what mattered, because of survival, your folks did things differently.
Yeah.
And so when we start to understand that, my approach to unlearning racism is to understand, not point fingers, but have more understanding. And that's what I think bridges gaps. And I use that in the work that I do. My approach to things tends to be not a right or wrong or shaming and this and that. It's like I need to understand where that come from. I want to get really curious, and I want to teach, not only learn and understand, because people of color have always tried to understand the other folks, but understand me too. And therefore, when we have that kind of understanding, we have a different relationship ourselves, and relationships are important to me. People used to say things like, children of color don't learn. They need relationships. You need to know their name. You need to slow down when you ask them how they feel. Look at them. There are things, they need relationships. They don't come from people who don't have relationship. That's how trust is built. They have time. It's warmer. It's different, and as a result of that, the needs are different.
So do you use primarily this axiology, or is there other things that you weave in, for example, when you're, because this has been something I've been very interested in, right? Like, how do we facilitate conversations in a way that is open, unity consciousness, integrated, right? How do we do that on both sides of the fence? And going back to your point about above and below the equator, you know, the one thing that for me and living all over the world, when I lived in Africa and I lived in Southeast Asia, the thing that was very evident to me was that the people there had a connection to the earth.
Yes.
That we've lost. This is sacred, right? We've lost access to that inner compass and that inner knowing. And you bring that out through the work that you do with the drums and beyond, right?
Yes. Yeah. And also it's just who I am. So I'm not even reaching. It's not something I can study. You can't study soul. You can't study connection like a I am grateful that it is in my DNA. I am
You're grateful that soul is in your DNA?
I'm grateful that what is imprinted and what matters is in my DNA. I inherited that. I passed that on. There is a there is mapping that is passed from mother to child. And I come from a rich lineage of folks who were medicine folks and healers because it's what I came from. I can't study that. So I feel that. I recall being in Africa, first time I was in Africa, and listening to drums, and I felt something. I remember reading about something Maya Angelou wrote about the first time she went to Africa, and she talked about feeling like she was floating on the waves. And I recall sitting there listening, and I felt literally seasick. And I thought, what is this feeling? There is something, I've never felt that anywhere else. That's not true. I felt it in Kauai, but I felt it a little differently there. But in Africa, I did not anticipate that. And it happened. And I thought I was checking around, seeing if others were feeling what I was feeling. They weren't. But I sure felt this. And I knew there was a potency about this. There always has been. I know there's healing and it's not just the skins. I know that live. It's live medicine, but I believe the hands and hearts that play them are they are experiencing something in order to play them. It's not. I've seen folks grab a drum and work on it. That's not the same. There is, when you are working with a healer, it is a very, very special experience that can happen. I'll never forget my master drummer, Babadan Babatunde, how he talked about this. He referred to it in the feminine, and the reverence for how he is with that drum. It is, I've learned to have more respect after watching how she is treated in his presence. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. No, it's a beautiful thing. And sometimes in class someone gets excited and goes near the drums thinking they can just have a good time. No, don't touch that. That's a sacred instrument, and you need permission to do that. It's a powerful thing, and it's beautiful, and I'm so grateful for what I've been able to come to open up, to reveal in movement with the drum as the backdrop, the heartbeat, the what is supporting my growth in that moment, wherever I need to go. And that's why I need to have them in my classrooms. And it's worth it for what I've seen happen, to see people leave looking better than I found them initially, and to see what relief and emotional weight loss looks like on people's faces.
Oh, I love that. Emotional weight loss. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
good.
what it looks like, and that's what it feels like. And I get to, facilitate that, and it's just such a beautiful thing to, in whatever emotion they're moving, to be able to give that sound and move that in their body. And there's a moment when you see someone in the classroom who may go from in their head worrying if they're doing it right, and then there's a point sometimes when you see them people use the term get lost in the drums. I'm like, I think you get found, actually. And it's a different look that shows up in their entire being.
It's surrender. It's literally
Yes.
surrendering into.
And the surprised look as they start coming back, wondering like, what the hell just happened? And, it's like you got a big dose of something really good that your body called for.
It's an ayahuasca journey without the medicine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally. Having experienced my ayahuasca journeys, it feels like that.
Yeah,
there are certain times and places where I can have that experience without that medicine, but using the medicine of the drums.
Yeah, whenever we have drum circles occasionally, and I just, we're going to start having them more, right, after we move, but just, getting people into that rhythm. I mean, it takes a little while, but then once you start connecting with everyone around, right, that's at least how we've been taught. You're playing off each other, and then you start synchronizing with each other. And it feels like all of our hearts are synchronizing with each other. Sometimes I wonder, can we use the drum to bring down the barriers of racism, right? Because if we can get our heartbeats to all beat in unison and this unity consciousness, then maybe we don't start seeing the color and the differences anymore. Maybe we start seeing the similarities, and maybe we start doing that through our hearts, right? That we're actually feeling each other's heartbeats. I don't know. I've always wondered about that, right? Because when you're in this altered state, you're not in a place of fear,
right?
Judgment. You're just when you're surrendering, you're going to that heart place. When you talk about your 8 stages in your FEMME training, it's different because it's facilitated, right?
It's facilitated, but it's not facilitated to the extent that it's telling you what to do. It's different opportunities to express. Now, the course, the class itself starts, it has a heart rate. It's built on a heart rate system. So we start off in grounding and just warming up the body, and that gets more rhythmic, or the music does, which means people tend to move faster, not to get out of breath, but certainly to warm the body up in preparation for the emotional tour. And because all our stories live deep in the hips and in the body, we want to warm up. And also, moving to drums, you can pull something if you're not warmed up. So there's a whole purpose behind this thing. You don't want to throw somebody into getting excited about dancing to congas or djembes and end up pulling a muscle. So we want to take care of the body. And then we go into the emotional tour, and that in the emotional tour, it's called that because we are just visiting each emotional tour stop, and we're a guide. So it's yes, we
It's a great name. I love the name.
yeah, and we thank you. And we move from one emotion to the next, and the music of the drums are playing to that beat. And the reason why the drums play to joy or grief, anger, confidence, lust, desire, whatever, when whether one goes there fully or not in movement and sound, you hear that beat. And so it's getting in. So the medicine is, I call it hiding the broccoli, but it's there. One's learned to just put it in there. And
It's
so
working in the nervous system, right?
absolutely, it's
Yeah.
working on the nervous system, and just being in the company of others. We all feel these emotions. These aren't emotions that are foreign to us. Everybody's felt anger to the extent that they've experienced any kind or read about of any kind of injustice. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anything that hurts anyone, but it's when do you need to speak up for yourself or someone else, like when something is not okay.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be enraged and screaming, but I'm talking about it's an emotion that we feel. I believe we're built like weather, and so there is change in us. We feel these things. We feel disappointment. We feel grief. What does it sound like? Where do you feel in your body?
And I think sometimes people lock things up, right?
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
I mean, I have girlfriends who have lost very close family members and not cried.
Yeah.
They haven't
And
gone through the tears, and the
so,
grief.
yeah, so I'm doing a lot of work around grief, and I want to just say this. I think it bears saying, and that is, tears are not necessarily a show of grief. They really aren't, and people say that very often. You haven't cried, or she hasn't cried.
Or
Tears,
released of something.
right?
Yeah.
But that tears are not necessarily. Many people show grief that way for sure, but everyone doesn't. Some people get quiet. Some
Mhm.
people just get really quiet. Um, Grief is something most people have not seen modeled in a healthy way, so they're afraid of it. They're deathly afraid of it.
Yeah, that's actually really well said. So true,
Yeah,
right?
they're so afraid of it. And what I know is that on the other side of grief, when you go through that scary place, there is a lot more life, creativity, love, possibility. All of that's on the other side. On this side, it just looks like a place you don't want to go. You
Yeah.
want what you want. You don't understand these gateways, and worse, some people don't even understand or feel they have a right to grieve. Think what I haven't lost anyone, so they only know the first gateway of grief, which is we will lose what we love, a person, a job, or something, and that's just one gateway. But there are other gateways. There is ancestral grief that is passed down
Yes.
mother to child. That's old stuff. It's in the DNA, but it's not of something current. So you won't be able to necessarily put your finger on it. There's grief for the world. How in the hell can I make these situations that are ginormous? How can I impact them? Racism, a pandemic, global warming, things that are just like you just don't even know where to begin, and wonder what have I done that created some of this? So that there's just this thing that you don't know what to do with because it's so large.
Or is there something I should be doing?
Or should be doing, by all means, yeah. And so that's a kind of grief, what we expected and did not receive, being
Mm.
given the benefit of the doubt, or I expected to be loved. I expected certain things. Another gateway is expected, didn't receive. parts of us that did not know love, our sexuality, our ideas. They're just things that get cut off or quieted.
Silence. Yeah.
Silence, because I gotta make a living, and so while I'm really an artist and I much rather paint murals or whatever, that I'm not getting paid to do that, so I have to do this other thing that I don't love.
Yeah.
But it's how I survive.
Yeah, it's constant. I don't know how many times you hear that from, my musician friends, my artist friends.
Yeah.
I mean, I just talked to a friend who was a photographer,
Yeah.
loved what she was doing, right? And then had to do this corporate stuff that she hated. And so she gave it up entirely. It was no longer joy.
Exactly. And so that lives in the body. And so it's with you every day. Your dreams don't go away because, you have to do other work. It's still there. You just quiet those things and just choke them into silence, but they're still there. The thing with burying emotions is that we bury them alive. So they're still there. And so it doesn't take, when you find yourself irritable and you're reacting at a 10 when really the situation was about a 2, what else is there? Where's the frustration? It's usually not even about the thing that's present. It's something else that's
so deeply buried,
absolutely.
deeply buried. And like you said, it could be ancestral, right? And unless we do some kind of past life regression or, going back and unlocking those memories that we've forgotten, they're going to stay locked.
Yeah. And for some, they have to do that over and over again. But yeah, it's there. It's there. And so I love doing grief work. My grief rituals end in movement and dance because there's so much. And usually once we put some attention on something and just giving it the time that it deserves and needs and pour compassion and love and understanding in, we actually can move to a different place. It doesn't change what we are grieving, but it changes our relationship to what we're grieving.
How do you get people through the emotion of embarrassment of, if even doing it without anyone watching, I think, and this is something I noticed in doing the training as well, that obviously everyone's doing their own thing. No one's really looking at you, and nor do they care, but there's always this feeling of, am I doing it correctly? And we know that when we surrender into it, that's when the healing happens, right? Once you're in your head, the healing can't happen. You need to go to your heart. So we know that intellectually, but there's still that human factor of, am I doing it correctly? Even looking at myself, right? Forget about everybody else.
Not only am I doing it correctly, but also am I being too much? I get that one a lot. When someone finally goes there, then it's like the shrinking, like, whoa, I did that. So we all got that message. Here's an interesting study about the patriarchy. It's so good that we don't even need it to set the bar. We've internalized it and started doing the self-checking. So even in privacy, you are so right. Even in privacy, there's this, is it okay? That checking, who are we checking in with? With who? But it's there. It's there. And what other people think matters so much more. So how to get past that, quite honestly, the way we got that message was watching it over and over and over again.
Hundreds of years.
Exactly. So the only way to change that narrative is literally to start taking up space and being that. I know when I teach everyone that comes through my training, your body is a living teacher. So when I talk about taking up space, when I talk about moving, when I talk about showing the emotion, I have to show it. I have to show it. I have to be that kind of raw, real, and vulnerable for someone to see that it's okay.
Oh, I love that. I love
Because
that.
who we look at, those are the models. Those are the models. And when we see that, it's like, oh, okay, well, if she can do it, I can do it a little bit.
Oh my God, Bernadette, that was literally my message. Anthony and I just spoke at New Living Expo this past weekend, and part of our presentation was exactly that. Speak your voice, speak your truth.
Yes.
When we show up messy, vulnerable, whatever that looks like, then it gives people permission to do the same.
Absolutely. One of the things we didn't talk about at the beginning, doing public speaking coaching, which I am loving because it is about what is the message that you want to tell and how to do that in a way that is compelling but and honest. The thing that is most universal messages are our most vulnerable messages.
Yeah.
So the more vulnerable we get, the more universal our message is. And so, yeah, it does require
That's interesting, actually.
showing the soft inside.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of courage, but it's a beautiful and connecting thing. And that's when you are establishing the relationships that people so deeply need. They see themselves in your example.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's not rocket science. It makes sense, of course, but, showing up and being that vulnerable,
Yes.
And not knowing there's always this, well, of course, we're human.
Yeah.
We all feel the same way. Anything that we can do to move into and through our emotions more, with the work that you're doing. So it's just like, bravo, bravo. That is what's going to unlock all the fear.
Yeah.
It's really fear, and I think however we get through that fear to get to the other side, we always like to say, do you plug into the fear grid or you plug into the love grid?
Right.
That's what it is. And there's all these variances in between, right? And so, I know that's not the language that you use, but when you're bringing people through trauma and grief and anger and all of, frustration, whatever these things are, you're bringing them through the process,
Yes.
the other side, so that they don't get locked there.
Exactly.
So can you give us an example or a couple if you'd like, and then we can wrap, the aha moments where maybe you've worked with someone and you didn't expect something to happen, and then suddenly it was like, we've heard the student shows up and then the teacher is there and then the teacher becomes the student, not realizing they're the student, when you write this exchange that happens all the time. So can you give an example of that where you were just kind of blown away by something you didn't expect with this work?
Yeah, I think of a couple of examples. I knew I needed this. I knew that. As I started to share it, I could see that other people felt relief in doing it, but you never know what's going on in people's personal lives. So there was a gentleman that used to come to class and very quiet, but regularly showing up. And he sent a letter at New Year's. And this is a few years after I had created the body of work and it was running. So it's been almost 10 years ago now.
Wow.
But this letter was really thanking me for creating a body of work where he got to express anger in a healthy way. And he said he was embarrassed. He said he was embarrassed to say this, but as a result of a healthy way to express anger, he no longer beat his wife.
Wow.
I recall being every time I think of that, there's something in me that to know that you have impacted a woman and her family. I don't know her. I've never met her. I know they had children. I can only imagine what kind of change that made. And I get emotional thinking about it because
my whole body just got chills going down my spine.
Yeah, that just, so I just think of generationally how something helped this gentleman. And you know, to have been able to be a part of that.
And maybe saved her life, Bernadette. Maybe
Yes.
saved her life.
Yes, that is not lost to me. And that just really, to say I'm grateful for that just seems, I didn't know I knew it was good, but I didn't know
How good.
how good. Yeah. And there's a woman who had come to a class in New York City once, and she was of Asian descent, and she said to me after class, she said, "Thank you so much for this class." She said she's in her early 30s, and she said when she was 6, she said, "In my culture, you don't show emotions."
So true.
And she said when she was 6, her dad died. And when she found out about it, she burst into tears. She said her mother told her to suck it up. And she said, since then, whenever she needed to cry herself or whenever she got upset, sad, she told herself to suck it up.
Mm.
And she said, in this class, you asked, you know, that we're given permission on this emotional tour stop of grief to express grief. And she said, and I actually grieved my father.
Mm.
And then we moved to the next emotion, but we shook in between. And she said, and I was okay.
Wow.
And she said, and I got to express that. And this woman's in her 30s, and she was 6 when this, but to carry that and to be able to let go of something that you have embodied. We were just talking about that, where you're checking, and she was saying that very thing. She was checking herself.
All the time.
She was telling herself to suck it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I meant by we have gotten the lessons that we can't, shouldn't, and don't color outside the lines so much that we don't even need someone nearby. We're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah.
So what I want to encourage and continue to encourage and am so committed to showing and being a living example of how to take up more space, how to raise your hand, how to say me, how to move in your body in a way that feels good, and how to show emotion and stop saying I'm fine when I be honest with myself and other people. And I want them to get used to that. They've gotten used to hearing I'm fine. They've gotten used to the bypass, and it is killing us. I don't want the heart disease that comes as a result of tucking my emotions away. I don't want the sleepless nights. I don't want the food that isn't digested. I don't want the bitterness of spirit.
Yeah.
So
I'm things that come with it, right? Disease comes with it.
Of course it does.
Cancer, heart disease, stress, anxiety, all of the stuff that you're talking about.
Hell, it can show up in the form of anything. I was buying shoes like I was losing my mind because I needed something to feel good because I wasn't willing to look at what was really there.
Yeah.
So, it got real expensive to not show my emotions.
That's funny. I'm laughing because I also have a very big shoe collection.
I hear you. Now, I'm not against shoes. It was my reason for
No, I
buying.
get it. I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Because I
I
got some
totally
shoes.
get it. It's funny because I think about like when Anthony and I were in Japan and we had this most amazing, because we were there for the magazine, among
Uh-huh.
other reasons, but we were given a private guide.
Uh-huh.
And she was amazing. I mean, she stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning, helping me tag photos of every single
Oh my
temple
gosh.
name so I didn't screw it up. No emotion though. There was no emotion. And she was with us for maybe 4 or 5 days. And she had become like family to us. I mean, I wanted to take her home with me. It's like, that's how she was just so loving. And her way to show love, of course, was to be there for us, to
That's
answer
it.
questions, to be there. No emotion, but she was showing love every single day. Breakfast, she had already ordered the tea that I liked so that when I sat down, it was already there for me. And I remember when we left, because I'm a very emotional and sensual person, I just wanted to give her a big hug and wrap
Right.
her up and, nothing came back. And I just
Yeah.
thought, oh, Sunshine, I want you to come home with me and play a little bit. We've got to play. That's what I felt. I couldn't think of another word. I wanted her to play more,
Yeah. I hear
whatever
you.
that looked like. And so I've
Yeah.
experienced that, especially with women, right? And I know that, those are extreme examples, but I know that, even type A women who, like us, who are
Yeah.
able to express, we bottle it up too in ways that we're not even aware of.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So, we might say, hey, we're expressive, we can hug, we can do this, we can speak our truth. But then I guarantee if you look deeper, there's
Yes.
something
Oh, yeah.
that you're bearing that you're afraid to speak up
Absolutely. And
about.
it's true. It is true. And so I think as long as we are being gentle with ourselves and not shaming because we aren't going those places and just letting it unfold in its own timing, but giving it the space to do that, giving,
Right.
not being so addicted to a distraction that we can't get close to a feeling.
Oh, I love that. That's really great. Yeah. Not say that again, because that was really good.
Good Lord. I think I said, I was so in the moment. I think I said, to not be so
Distraction.
addicted to distraction because
Yeah.
that we can't have a feeling.
Can't have the emotion.
Distractions,
Yeah.
just whatever they are, TikTok, Instagram, TV,
TV. Yeah.
gym, sex, spending money, whatever it is, there are things that we do so that we don't feel.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so, what are the things that, and it can be even a good thing, something, uh, but anytime we allow it to fill so much space and and that we reach for it rather than feel something, can we sit in the silence?
Yeah.
Can we be with ourselves? Can we check in honestly, spend some time disconnected from, you know, uh, all the distractions to just be with ourselves?
Yeah. That's a really great question. And it's a great question to ask those who are watching this right now. What are you doing, right? What are you doing and distracting yourself with so that you're not feeling the emotions
Yes.
that you truly need to feel, right? To have that inner joy and serenity and peace that you deserve,
Yeah.
right? Wow, Bernadette, this has been amazing.
Thank
You
you.
are so present, right? You're so incredibly present. I just feel glued to every word that you say. I feel that I could talk to you all night.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really pleased to have had this conversation with you. I love the places we went in this conversation.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. Absolutely. Are there any parting words that you would like to share with those who are listening right now?
I have this quote that, well, it's mine, so I like to say it, but it really is that there are no good, bad, light, or dark emotions, only emotions that need to be fully acknowledged and expressed. So I want to live in a world where people are more expressed, where they're not self-checking. As we've mentioned in this conversation, I look forward to the honesty that I desire to see in the world. And it starts with me. So if you ask me how I'm doing, probably not going to tell you fine. It may be TMI, but I'm going to tell you what's true for me, because I'm going to take the risk that you get to show your humanity by receiving that.
Wow, it's a gift, actually.
Yeah,
It's a gift when we're vulnerable and we just don't realize it.
Indeed.
Yeah. So with that, thank you so much. We're going to be putting links on the subsequent pages so you can find out more about Bernadette's work, how to reach her, and what she's working on. And we're just so grateful to have had this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.